Good afternoon. Welcome back. Doug Pagitt Radio 133 here on Sunday afternoon. Our conversation on religion that's not quite right. Normally joined in this part of our program by natural health coach Shelley Pagitt.
Yeah.
And some of you who listened to the broadcast last week, think maybe she's boycotting us now. Maybe she's walked out on us. Maybe she stormed out and said, enough is enough.
I kind of wondered that myself.
Yeah, you kind of wondered, is she not coming back? But no, she is just out.
So what happened was that for those who were watching on the internet, they may have seen an exchange between you and natural health coach Shelley Pagitt, who's also your wife.
Yeah, she yelled at me.
Plain and simple.
And they think that maybe she's not going to be back on. She thought I was a little too snarky. And then we went home and listened to it and actually realized it was you, sidekick.
It was me.
It was you, the troublemaker. But anyway, she's not, that has nothing to do with it. She loves the show. She's back. She's just off this week because she's sunning herself.
Yeah.
In sunny Key West, Florida.
Vacationing.
Central. She had to go early. So I'm in a conversation about religion quite often because it's what I do for my living. And one of the big issues that's facing Christianity in our country today is the issue of homosexuality.
The gays.
The gay issue. It's a big deal. It's a big deal in the churches.
Yeah.
It's a big deal in churches that have hierarchies where they're trying to decide what you do with gay. It's a big issue. It's a big. It's one of the touchstone argument points.
It is
for people in Christianity. It's a really big deal, and there are people with very passionate feelings on all sides, and like every big topic.
Yeah.
It brings along with it a number of other issues that people feel like, well, if you don't look at this topic, in this case homosexuality, the way I do, then what about all these other things? And that's the issue when in a conversation with someone, they often say, well, okay, but what about?
So like if
whenever that construct is in a sentence, you're in trouble.
If you're wrong, if I think you're wrong about this, then you're probably wrong about all these other things too.
Yeah, or in this case, it's, well, if I think the way you do, Doug, about saying that homosexual people are fully Christian and doesn't disqualify them from being Christian people, then what about the Bible?
Yeah.
Or what about, right, it's these other things. So then you realize, so your fear really is the Bible that's going to be lost, and you're not sure, you feel there's some tension in the air, right? And lots of other and I'm not trying to minimize people's arguments that way. I'm trying to say you begin to tap into people's real core issues, right? Yeah. And when I talk about this, and I go around the country and I talk about the fact that I think that someone being a homosexual does not disqualify them in any way, shape, or form from being a follower of God in the way of Jesus and being a participant in my church and all the rest of this, that there's people who say, well, that's easier for you to have that conversation because you live in Minneapolis, but you don't
the most fabulous city in the country.
Absolutely fabulous. You look fabulous, darling. And I hear that a lot. Well, then when I read this news article today, I thought maybe people have been on to something all along. Here's the headline: Gayest City? Magazine says it's Minneapolis.
Woo!
The
Swish it up.
none too scientific ranking is based both on the serious and the slightly silly criteria. So I immediately tuned in and said, "Oh, really? I didn't know there was a category of the gayest city." I mean, when I was in junior high, that had a whole different meaning than it would now. If someone were to win the award.
Sure.
Right? And now, so I read the article. Here's in part what it has to say. Minneapolis may have dropped a notch from the most literate city list this week, but the metropolis picked up a new title: Gayest City in America. That's according to The Advocate, the national gay news magazine that's based in Los Angeles. The city came out of nowhere and snatched the title as this year's winner from Atlanta, who had slipped to number 7. Now, this was Minneapolis's first appearance on the second annual list. So last year it wasn't top, but this year it is. And it shot right to the top. And they say why. What made Minneapolis shoot to the top so suddenly? Well, The Advocate, the magazine that gives out this little award, little tongue-in-cheek and slightly serious award, they changed their criteria. Last year, their criteria was looking for same-sex couples, gay marriage equality, gay bars, and this is the one that just blew my mind. The number of gay films on Netflix favorites pages. Like, really? So it was like going around saying, where do people live if they favorited gay films? Yeah, that's when I realized this really is sort of
I didn't know there was that many gay
This
films.
year, we look at the number of .com dating site profiles per city, the number of gay elected officials, lesbian bars, gay-friendly congregations, and gay yellow pages listings. Okay, so now I'm like, all right, now they're just being silly, but there's some seriousness to this, and I'm going to bring that up in a moment. The gayest city list may be all in fun, they go on to write, but Minneapolis is gay-friendly in many substantive way, according to some who are associated with the gay community. In fact, Minneapolis has a gay population of 12.5%, 2.5% above what's perceived as the national average. Now, there's a question to the people who put this together. Hey, do you ever get any negative feedback on this? There's some people who would say, if Minneapolis is a gay city like that, I don't feel safe going there. Right? I heard this stuff in the 70s and 80s about San Francisco all the time.
Yeah.
Real fear of homosexuals said, I'm not going to San Francisco. That's not safe.
Yeah.
Right? So
there's like marauding gays running through the streets.
Yeah, the gay gangs. They just sort of, it's catchy. Well, what about those who don't view gayest as a positive, the article asked. Well, the person who put this together said, I don't think there should be any backlash. I would laugh if anyone took it all that seriously. If anyone wouldn't come to Minneapolis because of our list, I would be disappointed in their sense of humor and very sad. Okay, so I bring all that up to introduce this topic. I try to talk about the issue of how churches should interact with with the topic of homosexuality and with gay people. And I tried to raise this issue by commenting on a news article about a friend of mine named Jay Baker, who has a book coming out where he tries to argue that the biblical arguments about homosexuality are really using 20th century anthropological categories in ways that they shouldn't.
Okay.
So his argument is, when you see prohibitions in the Bible against homosexuality, it never uses the word or phrase homosexuality. It's actually referring to some kind of imbalanced relationship between men and young boy sex slaves. So it's talking about some kind of sex trafficking. It's not, but those words, starting in 1958, were changed in most modern English versions of the Bible to use the phrase homosexuality.
Okay.
As opposed to the more complex term of someone engaging in some kind of same-sex pedophilia.
So, like, after 1958, they kind of changed how it said that in the Bible.
Yeah, well, what Bibles do, right? Because Bibles are in English, the people that read them in English, they know that they weren't written in English. They were written in Greek, and there was some Aramaic, and there's some Hebrew. So they're having to translate words from one language into words in another. And sometimes they're not very accurate with those words. So they try to use most commonly what's called an equivalency phrase. So what in that setting would have meant the same thing in this setting.
Sure.
Right. And that's a very common way that you have to do any kind of linguistic translation. And the argument that he makes, and I believe that he's right about this, is that phrase, homosexuality, is one that gets inserted because it made sense to people in their minds about what they thought that meant. But it's probably not the best word or phrase for it.
Yeah.
So he's simply trying to say, don't say the Bible is on one side of this issue when it's not actually on that side of the issue. So he writes this book. Another person wrote an article about that book on the Huffington Post and said, is there some kind of happening going on within evangelical Christian communities to become more accepting of gay people? So I posted that and said, there's some interesting thoughts from the author of the book and from my friend who's an author of the article. Then this person writes a comment, and his comment was this: if evangelicals, he goes on to say, and because that's what I raised in the article, or that is what the article raised. So this person goes on to write, if evangelicals are a generation or two from accepting anything, then what role do they have in speaking for morality at all? Okay? So he says, hey, look, if we give up this issue on morality, then how can we speak out on any other issue that has moral consequence? To which my response, and what I wanted to bring up here on the program, is the moral problem is that churches exist and tell gay people that they're not welcome. That is a moral problem.
Yeah.
Right? So he may say, I think that someone behaving in homosexual ways is morally inappropriate, that it's a moral violation. I think that religious communities that meet together and say to people, you can't be part of this, I think that's immoral.
Yeah.
So what's interesting in our argument here is I would say, you're right. We have to speak up about the morality of this. And I think it's immoral for you to say to someone else, based on basically cultural reasoning, that I don't think even holds up.
Yeah.
So now we find ourselves in a conversation where he said, well, you just don't want to hold to any moral standards. And I'm saying, no, I absolutely want to hold to moral standards. And I think that saying to gay people, you are not welcome in this church, or God is against you, or God, I think that's immoral.
Yeah.
So now we find ourselves not arguing about the morality of homosexuality, but which behavior is more immoral. And the trouble is, it's very hard to have that conversation, right? Because it shifted. As soon as he brought up morality, I kicked into my sort of moral policing. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I'm somebody who wants to run around and say, well, there are no morals. On what basis do you have morals? I think there's lots of bases on which you can have morals. That's why a couple weeks ago when we had the atheists on, atheists have morals.
Yeah, they
do. Morals aren't held to just one group or one religious perspective. People can have their moral arguments supported by all kinds of things. So the issue of morality is not that one side wants to set it aside while the other one wants to protect it. It's deciding, what if your behavior causes you to be immoral in this? So there's something troubling about this. Something difficult about saying, how do you have this conversation? Now, maybe it's possible for me, and I've changed my thinking a lot on this in the last 10 years, and it's because I've been in a city and in church conversations and with a number of people who think about homosexuality so differently than I do. I know that I wouldn't have thought differently if I hadn't been surrounded by the people that I was surrounded by. Mm-hmm. And some people would say, yes, there's a Bible phrase for that. It's called bad company corrupts good morals, right? Yeah. And I don't know if that is bad company corrupting my good morals or good company corrupting my bad morals.
Right.
Because that certainly happens too. I don't know how to put this together.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I'm just surprised by how people become immoral in defending, that which they think is moral. Like how people behave so badly in trying to uphold what the Bible says, yeah. And they have all this anger and animus, and there's obviously been a lot of talk about that in the news, but it just seems like your own behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know what a lot of people hear in this as well. So here's what the Bible says. The Bible says this thing is wrong and bad and a violation of God, but I still need to be nice to people who violate God. Whatever. I think we do need to do that. But I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that's the argument around homosexuality. I think people who try to use the Bible to make that argument aren't making it accurately. So even though I would say, yes, I think God says to criminals and to people who hurt others and to people who are greedy, they're doing a bad thing, but we should still be good to them. I just don't think that's the argument that we make about homosexuality. Now, we only have 39 seconds left in the segment, so we can't get into all of that. But at some week, I'm going to do a whole show on this topic.
Sure. Because
I really think we have to figure out how to think about it differently. But what were you going to say?
We should pick up Aaron's advice and get a gay friend, and I think that will radically change the way that a lot of people think if you just had a relationship with someone who is gay.
Yep. I think you're right. So anyway, we're struggling through those things. We're going to be back here with the Right On, and the Right On goes to those who are trying to make just a little tweak in Dr. King's speech, that great speech, the I Have a Dream speech. Just a little suggestion for you here from the Right On. Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950 and the voice of Minnesota and DougPagittRadio.com.